It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Finally, it's good morning and welcome. How long I've waited to be able to say that. Coming to you live from Bali. In fact, if you listen carefully, you can hear the roar of the mighty Indian Ocean coming across the bay from Lombok just behind me. I'm very sorry about the delay in beginning the show. It has been a magnificent, Herculean, technical task for which I'm grateful to everyone who participated. So, little Zelensky is in Mar-a-Lago and Donald Trump's never off the phone with President Putin. Is it the denouement? Well, it certainly is for the beautiful Brigitte Bardot, who's passing at the age of 91. We mark on this show tonight. She once came to Scotland to see me in 1966. Well, not quite to see me, but to a place that I used to work. And she cavorted on the sands of Ghislaine, or Gillen, which I used to, once upon a time, do myself. It's going to be the mother of all talk shows. Oh, and what's this thing they call Somaliland? You're about to find out, because it is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Well, you think it's late for you. It's 3:30 in the morning. We were closing the show to the sounds of prayer just the other day when we were in Jakarta. Tonight we will end the show to the sun coming out like thunder across the bay. It is a remarkable thing that the wonders of a mom and pop and son show can come to you live all the way from Bali. I hope you will agree. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and are looking forward to a peaceful and prosperous new year, and a healthy one, I am now finding myself increasingly saying. Now, it is, of course, not the most important news issue or item of the day, but for someone of my age and gender, at least, the death of Brigitte Bardot marked the end of an era. In the 1960s, she was quite the most ravishing, beautiful woman in the entire world. I'm not sure you would have wanted to bring her home to meet your mother, and I'm not sure it would have been wise to marry her, but she really, truly was somebody. She really was emblematic of a France in the 1960s which seemed to ooze sensuality and style. We're talking the era of Brigitte Bardot, of Alain Delon, to whom I was briefly compared. Well, she did actually come to Scotland in 1966 to the sands of Gillen, or Gullane, Gullane, just near the town of North Berwick, where I worked for a month or so in what became the famous and very important North Berwick by-election, the Berwick and East Lothian by-election, to give it its Sunday name, when the prospects of the SNP winning a rock-solid and historic Labour seat held by John P. McIntosh, a great Labour intellectual of the time, were very real indeed. I remember it for many reasons, not just because I was cavorting in the sands where once Brigitte Bardot did, but because the Iranian Revolution began in that very month. And I remember the Labour Foreign Secretary deploring, condemning the people of Iran rising up against the British favourite of the time, the late Shah of Persia. I remember thinking, how could a Labour Foreign Secretary be backing a despotic Shah and against a people's revolution? And then I learned that's what foreign ministers of Labour governments do in times of trouble. Beware of the geeks bearing gifts, by the way, and you don't get more geeky than John Healey, the current British Defence Secretary. He's trying to entice our students to take a gap year. Not in Bali, as would once have been the case, but in the British Army. Well, if they've been educated at all, if they have the brains to have gotten to university in the first place, they'll blow a huge raspberry to the chief geek, John Healey, so-called war minister in another so-called Labour government. But the big story, of course, tonight is the story unfolding on a different set of sands, on new beaches, not Gillen and definitely not Bali. The beaches of Florida, Mar-a-Lago, the summer White House, which Donald Trump seems to occupy quite a lot of the year. He plays golf there daily, despite the bone spurs problem that kept him out of the Vietnam War and earned him 7 deferments, so that he wouldn't have to die face down in a paddy in Southeast Asia. I've been looking at the paddies in this area over the last few days, and a magnificent sight they are, but you wouldn't want to die face down in them for the American empire. Well, there in Mar-a-Lago, little Zelensky is presently. He's presently ensconced, having stopped off briefly, you might say, but very profitably, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which definitely isn't Mar-a-Lago, definitely isn't Florida, with all my respect to the good people of Nova Scotia. Why did he stop in Halifax? Well, why else does he stop anywhere? He had his bag open and he picked up another $3 billion. It's a magic number, that. $3 billion from Markcarney, the man who robbed the Bank of England and who is now the Prime Minister of Canada, although Trump calls him the Governor of Canada, which he intends, before he leaves office, if he can, to make a State of the Union. McCartney, despite the fact that the deficit, public sector deficit in Canada is a world record deficit, despite the fact that millions of Canadians are now food insecure, despite the fact that homelessness is rife in Canada, despite the fact that people are freezing and unable to heat their homes, there's always money when Zelensky comes to town. This despite the fact that the NBU, the people who are nabbing parliamentarians, ministers, and chief officials in Ukraine are on the rampage back in Kiev, where corruption is ever closer, closing in on Zelensky himself. The American-driven anti-corruption drive, too little, too late, as Hunter Biden just told us. The corruption in Ukraine was scary, and he was very foolish to have gone there. Very foolish, but exceedingly well paid. The emolument of working for Burisma in Kiev was surely irresistible for him, and it was definitely irresistible for his father, the big guy who was then the Vice President of the United States. So as the internationally recognized anti-corruption drive narrows in, zeroes in on lots of zeros of euros, dollars and pounds, McCartney just handed billions of Canadian dollars to little Zelensky, who then took off for sunnier climes. And there he is now in Mar-a-Lago. I don't want to be churlish. I'm as keen for this war to end as anyone else. But the mood music is not particularly conducive to me. We'll see what my expert guests have to say about it. But the fact is, Trump is sounding bullish. Trump is sounding like a man with the Nobel Peace Prize firmly in his mind. And if not the Nobel Peace Prize, then the FIFA World Cup Peace Prize. Oh no, he's already got that, despite launching 8 wars in the time that he has been involved. Oh, sorry, that was solving 8 wars, most of which haven't been solved at all. Donald Trump is sounding bullish. He is saying that the time has come for peace, and that both leaders, Putin, to whom he spoke in a friendly conversation, that was his word to describe it, for 1.5 hours before Zelensky arrived. That was an early start for the Donald. And then Zelensky, who has no cards, as Donald Trump acutely observed months ago in the Oval Office, is also now interested in peace. Well, we'll see about that. The caveats with which Zelensky habitually cushions these kind of statements are caveats that are deal breakers. So we shouldn't be over optimistic. But the scenario is an indicator of how badly the war is now going for Zelensky and his corrupt regime in Kiev and the NATO enablers of this bloody war, which has killed, I remind you, millions of people, has driven 9 million Ukrainians from their home, has caused death and destruction on a scale not seen in Europe since the Second World War, in a war that should never have started back in 2014, when NATO surreptitiously at first began to encourage the use of Ukraine as a cat's paw, as a knife actually, in the side of Russia. If it all comes to pass, I'll be the first one to take my hat off to Donald Trump. If it all ends today, tomorrow, in the next few days, Trump has said that as soon as he's finished with Zelensky, he'll be phoning Vladimir Putin again. Vladimir Putin, though, was in action in military gear. He is the commander-in-chief of the Russian armed forces, who are presently sweeping all before them, and he talked tough. He said if Zelensky doesn't want to negotiate an end peacefully to this carnage, this catastrophe, then the Russian armed forces will end it by force. And looking at the military map, as I do 10 times every single day, it's not an idle boast. There is no doubt that if a deal is not struck as a result of these talks in Mar-a-Lago, then there will be no deal, and the Russians will go all the way, maybe even all the way to Kiev, at least until they have installed a government in Kiev that is reliably neutral and reliably not hostile to them. That's the price that we pay for having failed to grasp the multiple diplomatic opportunities that there were to solve this matter before the big fighting even really started. It's important to remember the Minsk agreements. I was recently in Minsk, as you know, and I'm fully seized of the perfidy that was visited on the world by the deliberate sabotage of the Minsk agreements. That was before the special military operation even started. Both the Angela Merkel, the then German Chancellor, and Francois Hollande, the then French President, who were both guarantors of the Minsk III agreement, have confessed in public that the Minsk agreements were never meant to work. They were meant only to give breathing space and time to build up the military of the Ukrainian regime and then to use them again in a phase two. It's important to remember the Istanbul Agreement within a couple of weeks of the military operation beginning, which were inked by both Russia and Ukraine and would have ended this war before it ever really got started. That was scuppered by our own Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. It's important never to forget these things. And the Alaska formula agreed in Anchorage between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin should now be used to bring this conflict to an end, and an era of, if not amity, then at least an absence of hostility and enmity should now dawn. Speaking of dawn, it's coming up before me quite soon. Only time really for me to talk about the situation in Somaliland. I've been being softened up by those behind the attempt to secede from Somalia by something called Somaliland, which is an entirely fictional entity, a brutal British torture chamber. And it isn't even all of Somaliland. Somaliland is 4 parts. 3 of the parts want to remain in Somalia. We have a breakaway separatist clan now declaring independence in Somaliland. It only has 1 country in the world recognizing it. And which country, dear viewer, do you think that is? Israel is the only country in the world to afford legal and official recognition to this breakaway statelet, this rump of Somaliland. Why would they do that? Well, a glance at the map will show you not just why they would do it, but why the Americans would be secretly backing it. A look at the geography of Somaliland would show that it would command the waterways in the Horn of Africa to an extent that is truly world-changing. It would change the balance of force in the world. Now, the proximate reason for Israel's recognition is to take occupation of the Berbera air base, which they have just done this evening. Why would Israel want the Berbera air base? Well, from that air base, they could very easily and regularly bomb Yemen without having to take the trouble of flying over multiple Arab countries, embarrassing those countries, in order to do so. It would also, of course, be a handy staging point for further attacks on Iran. Question is, will it work? Well, one of the best things I read today was from a news source in Gaza, which said it's quite clear the Israelis plan on deporting us to this new fake entity of Somaliland. But if they do, we'll only be there 5 minutes, and in association with our Somali brothers, we'll take the place over. And then we will hold Berbera Air Base, and we will be able to blockade the Persian Gulf, blockade the waters of the Red Sea. Now, I don't think Israel is that stupid, but if they are planning on deporting the fighting people of Gaza to Somaliland, they have got another think coming. It won't work because none of the Arab countries can afford, officially at least, to give it recognition, to follow in the footsteps of Benjamin Netanyahu. None of the countries of the world that we call the global south will do so. None of the African countries will do so. And in fact, if I'm any judge, there'll be an international brigade amassing perfectly soon in Somalia proper to take this renegade semi-province over again. Well, I don't know how long I've been speaking because we started at an unauthorized time, for which again I'm sorry, but we have got two great guests. Coming up, it's Lieutenant Colonel Aguilar, who made his name not just as an American officer, but made his name as a hero of Gaza. And he'll be talking about all of these things. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows. I think you don't have to worry about these things with Mamdani, because my overwhelming feeling is that Mamdani is a phony. He has as much intention of doing these things as, you know, I compare him to a figure in British Labour history who became briefly famous in the US when Joe Biden was found to have plagiarized him during a presidential run some decades ago. But that man's name was Neil Kinnock. He used to talk all this flowery, far left guff like Mamdani does, but he had no intention whatsoever of actually doing anything about it, of doing any of it. So there's no chance whatsoever that Mamdani is going to defund the New York Police Department.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, here's the poll this evening, maybe quite prescient. Has Donald Trump made the world safer? Yes or no? You can vote on Telegram. My Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. You should follow me there anywhere. On my X, on the YouTube community poll, the YouTube stream, and if you're one of the vanguard, the creme de la creme, and following me and supporting me on patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote in that ballot box. Has Donald Trump made the world safer? Maybe the result of this poll next week will be different to what it's looking like tonight, or maybe not. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and impoverished Canada. So now that Carney has just given even more of your money away, making Canada the world's biggest pro-rata supporter of little Zelensky, I wonder how that worked out. If you're in the US and Canada, you'll be glad that it's toll-free. +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge. In Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522. And the worldwide number is 0044203 966 2625. Now, the retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Aguilar, retired U.S. soldier and former worker at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, was a big hit when he appeared on the show before, and I'm glad to welcome him back this evening to the mother of all talk shows. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you again for joining us. We have fond memories of your testimony and your actions in support of the people of Gaza, and I'll come back, I promise, to that. But your thoughts, first of all, on the goings-on in Mar-a-Lago, not the usual kinds of goings-on, it appears, that used to happen in Mar-a-Lago, but little Zelensky there, is he being humped by Trump, or is this all just kabuki theater?
First of all, I'd like to say it's a welcome occasion to get to speak with you again on the show and speak with your audience. As I looked at the live footage of the Mar-a-Lago visit that's taking place now, flanking Trump, you see his cast of clowns: Steve Miller, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, the usual suspects, if you will. And this is a setup for Zelensky to where he will leave with no good terms on his plate. But back in the war zone, we have Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation forces seizing land at every opportunity before there is a deal struck and the ink is dry, because Vladimir Putin knows that he gets the final say. Trump has already signaled that. It's reminiscent of the Battle of Mons, Belgium in World War I, or in the Meuse-Argonne campaign as Allied forces tried to seize terrain leading up into the last minutes of the signing of the armistice. Russia will be in a better position strategically and geographically and politically in these final hours if what we see from Mar-a-Lago results in a deal. I have come to grow very weary of Trump's promises of deals. They are often short-sighted. They often do not include equal representation of the parties, and someone always gets screwed. So we will see what comes of these meetings today. But looking at the cast of characters that has been drawn to Mar-a-Lago, I am not confident that this will lead to some kind of momentous diplomatic moment.
Someone always gets screwed in Mar-a-Lago. No truer word was ever spoken on the mother of all talk shows. The cast of clowns, as you put it, that are gathered around Trump, well, that could be one of two things, couldn't it? It could be a face-saving exercise for Zelensky, forced to drink the hemlock, but doing so in lots of medalled gentlemen and ladies, and all the full dress parade, really, of the Trump White House. It might be that. Or it might be that they have been forced to come there to provide force majeure. You'll recall in the humiliation of Zelensky in the Oval Office many months ago now, it was Vice President J.D. Vance that kind of led the charge against Zelensky. So maybe it's strength in numbers from Trump. Maybe Trump isn't quite the strong man he always likes to pretend he is.
I certainly think that there are considerations in that. He is not the strong man that he has portrayed himself to be. He is certainly not the president of peace. He is certainly not the all-knowing. He is not the master of diplomacy as he feels that he is, and I think that he realizes that. And as you see in his cabinet, here in the United States, in these weekly cabinet meetings where he brings his cabinet members around, where they all spend 5 to 10 minutes just embellishing their accomplishments of the week and praising President Trump. He runs his cabinet like the mafia. I would say that, however, the mafia at least has red lines and rules to which not even they will cross. This cabinet knows no bounds of decency. They will lie, they will cheat, and they will steal. And this is another attempt, much like we saw with the UN resolution that was adopted, UN Resolution 2803, that has now become this peace deal. The bullying in the region of recognitions and sweetheart deals being made. Trump is running the administration and the United States, our treasure, our blood, our hard work, and our democracy as a mafia. And it is incredibly concerning because he continues to do it. This is yet another instance on full display to the American people.
He's definitely not the Teflon Don, though, is he? The lumps are coming off him visibly as we speak. The Epstein affair and the Venezuela adventure, both deeply unpopular causes for Trump and the Republicans, have left the Republicans in dire danger of losing control of the Congress in November. How long do you think he's got to pull the irons out of the fire?
Well, he is certainly losing support domestically, both in Congress and in popular vote. He is running out of time, and I think that we see this scrambling, if you will, to make deals and agreements which he ran on. I mean, if we see the shift in the United States with the MAGA base, if you will, is turning on Trump at the grassroots level for these promises that he made that are not being fulfilled, and putting America first, of which he is not. And he is running out of time to make deals and end wars and put America first and start bringing at least a perception of benefit back to the American people, which Americans are growing incredibly aware and incredibly wary of what is happening, especially if you juxtapose this current situation with not only how Gaza has been left, which is not a ceasefire, how Russia stands to gain from this in every way imaginable for Vladimir Putin, but looking at what we're now doing in Venezuela and the reasons we're doing that there. And Americans are becoming more and more aware of this and kind of breaking away out of their trance from the Kool-Aid and looking at, hey, this is not what we voted for. And so I think if we look at how November is coming with the midterm elections, he is running out of time, and the Republican Party, because of his leadership, is not in a good place in the United States.
But speaking of that, Lieutenant Colonel, I mean, and my point about him not being as strong a man as he likes to pretend, he has, like the grand old Duke of York in our nursery rhyme, he's marched 10,000 men to the top of the hill, and he's going to have to march them all down again, isn't he? Because it's quite plain to me, first of all, there aren't enough men to invade Venezuela in this hugely expensive task force that he has assembled. There's not the political support in the United States to do it anyway. He doesn't have the legal power to do it, and a Congress that is afraid of what's coming up next November in the midterm elections is hardly likely tamely to go into that good night. How does he get out of the corner he painted himself into in Venezuela?
Well, what we've seen, Trump's modus operandi, is he will begin to throw other people under the bus. I think that Admiralhalsey, who was the Southern Command Geographic Combatant Commander, who smartly resigned from being any part of this, and then in his stead comes General the SOCOM, the Special Operations Command Commander General Bradley, moved in to take that authority of these strikes. I think in the coming weeks and months, we're going to see general officers, Pete Hegseth perhaps, and others they're going to start to be thrown under the bus. And Trump is going to try to distance himself from this and saying that he was misled, or saying that others made these decisions, not him. We saw this in his first term as the president of the United States, where, let's all remember that no one survived Donald Trump's first term unscathed. I mean, people went to prison, people were embarrassed, people lost their livelihoods, people were destroyed. And we're only in the first year of this second term. And the deck is set. There are going to be people that are going to be blamed and thrown under the bus. And to your point, I think it's important to say right now, to repeat what I said when I had the opportunity to speak with you months ago, in that what is happening in Gaza is a microcosm of what will happen in other parts of the world. Because once this impunity, this violation of international norms, this complete departure of international law and Geneva Convention and sovereignty and everything that stitches humanity together in this very complicated world is now been thrown out the window. And as I have warned all Americans, that when the piper comes to call for his due, it's going to be American soldiers in flag-draped coffins, not Donald Trump and his crony cabinet being held accountable. The American people will pay. You are right. The United States military is not sized, nor equipped, nor ready to fight a war in the global south in Venezuela, where we may also be fighting against Russian and Chinese naval forces. We will lose aircraft carriers. We will lose Generation 5 fighters. We will lose battalions of soldiers and Marines. The death toll will be monumental, and the American people will suffer from the loss of life, from the hit to our economy, from the hit to our military readiness. And what's truly frightening for me as an American, but also as a citizen of the world, is that the cabinet that surrounds Donald Trump, they have no idea what they're doing. We're not talking about a president that surrounded himself with Clausewitz or Kissinger. We have people that have no idea what they are getting into, nor any way to get out. There's no political objective. Therefore, there really is not an end state other than attrition and death and loss. And America needs to wake up to this before it's too late.
Now, no sooner will Zelensky have left Mar-a-Lago and Netanyahu will arrive. What's he coming for this time?
Well, Netanyahu's been kind of on a tour over the last week. If you recall, on the 22nd of December, he was speaking to the leaders of Greece and the Cypriot leadership. And then, of course, just a couple days ago, the out of left field recognition of Somaliland, which is not only a slap in the face to Gaza and the Palestinians in recognition, but as you can see, what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing right now is stitching together the final tapestry of phase 3, of which I witnessed and observed and saw these plans when I was in Gaza working with the highest ranks of the Israeli Defense Forces. And in that phase 3, the plan is to either starve, kill, let die as many Palestinians as possible, which we see is the current status, and to then forcefully displace all of them. Well, we know that in that greater Israel plan of this forced diaspora of Palestinians, one of the places on the map was Somaliland. One of the places on the map is Cyprus. One of the places on the map are other areas in the region that Netanyahu can influence leaders to take them. So I think that what we're going to see during this meeting in Mar-a-Lago is 3 things will be on the agenda. 1, Netanyahu's periodic checkup with Trump to make sure he's staying in line. His Mafia Don check-in with his regional capo to make sure that he is still following the Israel's party line and that Israel is still first. He'll also discuss with him about how the United States can influence through other sweetheart deals, potential land in Somaliland, potentially land in Cyprus, to be areas to forcefully displace surviving Palestinians. This is all part of Project Sunrise, which Jared Kushner revealed last week in his negotiations with Israeli leadership, of which no Palestinians were a part of. And we're looking at where these potential locations can be. And I think third is the concern that there are this movement or this wave of more and more Americans that are becoming less pro-Israel, certainly less Israel first, and what that may mean for Israel's security and Israel's ability to continue to receive unlimited amounts of U.S. money and unlimited amounts of U.S. bombs. Let's remember that Israel still receives billions of dollars from the United States in not only direct aid, but also in military materiel, bombs, equipment, bullets. Every bomb being dropped in Gaza, which is still happening, is provided by the United States. So I think this trip is really shoring up those guarantees, getting the United States to commit more to what this plan will look like, because I think we have all seen now that this UN Resolution 2803 had no meat. It had no tooth to tail. It was just good ideas on paper. That now, what do we do that Palestinians have survived? What do we do with surviving Palestinians that aren't willing to leave? I think the United States is going to become more involved in regional sweetheart deals.
It's a race against time, as you correctly describe it. Israel's star is falling fast throughout the world. It's fallen most of the world, but it's falling fast even in the United States itself, where once it was as constant as the Northern Star. Trump's presidency is not running out, but time is running. And he's he's 79 years old, soon to be 80, I think. His hopes of a political dynasty are dulled by the current unpopularity of his administration and all these problems that are like a sea of ducks that are waiting to be sunk. The reality is that Netanyahu too is in a race against time, isn't he? He keeps talking big. He's going to attack Iran again, and so on. It's difficult, given what happened last time in the 12-day war, to imagine that he could be seeking Trump's support for another war against Iran. Is it difficult for you to believe?
If you would have asked me a few months ago if it was difficult for me to believe and accept, I would say yes, there was probably still a level of cognitive dissonance in wanting to accept that. However, now I am eyes wide open and crystal clear in the fact that the wars that we will be involved in or pulled into, if you will be for Netanyahu's political survival, and likely for that in the coming years, a reciprocal partnership in supporting Trump in Venezuela to maintain his political survival. You know, Trump has not taken this third term nonsense off the table. In fact, just 3 weeks ago when he was hosting Miriam Adelson in the White House, and he told the world that she provided $250 million to his previous campaign, and that she came up on stage in the American Oval or in the American White House and said, "I'll give you another $250 million, Donnie, if you run again." So this notion of this third term, which if we look at how they originally authored this plan before Trump taking office, that would be done potentially through some type of War Powers Act or maintaining of power because of war. Well, if you look at the chess pieces that are being set, not only in the Middle East, but also in the global South, in our backyard, so to speak, in Latin America, it looks awfully like that. And this administration, if one thing it has not let me down in, it's in disappointment. It has not let me down in its ability to disappoint in its absolute immoral, unethical, personal preservation, self-driven use of national force. It's quite appalling. But yeah, absolutely with Netanyahu in Israel, he is not only in a race against time. He has to keep the Knesset together, and it's falling apart because he's not hardline enough on one side, and he's corrupt on the other, and the walls are closing in. And I think he clearly sees that. So when a rabid dog is cornered, what do? They lash out where it's going to happen. I think we're going to see that happening with strikes in Iran or other types of just really irrational diplomatic acts, like we saw with the recognition of Somaliland. I think Somaliland themselves were probably like, whoa, we weren't expecting that. Like, I think that caught the world off guard. And it's just this lashing out at trying to hold on to something to maintain his power. And I think that the world has now seen that crystal clear. I don't think anyone doubts that now.
And it is the old guard again, isn't it, Lieutenant Colonel? As I said in my monologue, when I was a member of the British Parliament, I was receiving regular correspondence from people seeking to soften up parliamentary approval for a breakaway state in Somalia called Somaliland. It's a misnomer, as you definitely know. It's a clan thing. It's not the territory of Somaliland, 3/4 of which has no interest in a breakaway state and is presently demonstrating that literally on the streets right now and beginning to think about the need for a military intervention, a bit like Vietnam, Cambodia back in the day when Pol Pot had to be overthrown. But it's the old guard. It started in London. It's a former British colony. Israel is right at the center of it, with the Americans providing the firepower. I mean, it's no accident that Donald Trump has made this turn to Africa. It's no accident that he's bombing Nigeria. He is clearly involved in what is clearly an effective coup against Africa, an Israeli recognized breakaway state with the Berbera Air Force Base and the commanding views of the Gulf.
Yes, absolutely. The map that you showed in the beginning of the segment is incredibly useful and powerful to see the exact location geographically of where holding Somaliland, especially with the large airfield, puts Israel in prime position to continue what they've been doing in the region. Now, no longer do they have to fly their F-35s out of Kiryat Yat or Tel Aviv and refuel en route using U.S. tankers. They can stage them there, and it's literally a stone's throw away across the Gulf. And they can strike Yemen, and they can strike others, and they can control that region, which they have always said that they wanted. So, yeah, the geography of it puts them right where they want to be. And if you look at the, further up the coastline there where you have Qatar, you have the largest U.S. military base outside of the U.S. in Central Command's area of responsibility in Doha, right there in Qatar. So now you're surrounding the area with massive U.S. and Israeli military might in aircraft and reconnaissance capability and strike capability. This becomes ever more dangerous, and it also becomes a location that is secondary to support U.S. Continued U.S. military interventions in Africa, in the Sahel, in Nigeria, in Niger, and Mali, and in that area where U.S. Special Forces have been operating in that area of the southern and Sahel regions of Africa for decades, and now it's just coming to where we're doing it overtly. And one thing I can say about Trump is that whether he does it intentionally or not, he says all the quiet parts out loud. We should go back into Afghanistan and take Bagram so we can spy on China. We should strike ISIS and Daesh elements in Nigeria or Niger or Mali, and use the excuse for we're defending Christians when we're really just trying to flex our military power. He said these things. He doesn't. So, like I said, whether it's intentional or accidental, he says the quiet part out loud, and we should take him at his word that is exactly why it's being done. This is not for security. This is not for supporting an ally or bringing peace to the region or stabilization. This is exponentially destabilizing the region in a way that I don't think we've seen in the last 50 years. And when you look at how quickly things can devolve, I guess you say, break down in terms of open conflict in this region, it is certainly a powder keg of which the United States is now in the cockpit holding the joystick with Israel in this. We are not bystanders. The United States is absolutely complicit in each step of this. And it's a dangerous place to be, because I think we have seen throughout history that when it come time to cut and run, Israel will not stand with us. I mean, sometimes why do you don't need enemies when you have friends like Israel.
It's true. But I'm enjoying this so much. Forgive me if I take just a little bit more of your time. All of this requires quiescence from some pretty unquiescent partners. For example, we showed the Gulf of Aden there, just across it, the Ansar Allah forces who were perfectly capable of landing ballistic missiles down the chimney pots in Tel Aviv with regularity over this last period of genocide. It wouldn't take much for their missiles to be recalibrated for the much shorter distance of hitting Israeli bases in Somaliland. Ditto Iran. It would require quiescence from Iran to be further surrounded by American and Israeli military assets. It would require the quiescence of the Sahelian bloc that you referred to, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, to allow this alien body to enter into their bloodstream. It would require, and this is something your expertise sought to profit from, how do you get the Palestinians in Gaza to go to Somaliland? And how do you guarantee that once they're there, the Palestinian revolution doesn't start up all over again in Somalia?
Absolutely, and that's where the players in this game, from the United States perspective at least, are so inept and so inexperienced to ask that second and third or fourth order effect, that they don't see it coming. But to those that are educated, that understand the region, that study, that read history, that look at what's happening on the ground, realize that absolutely. And to the first point you brought up with Ansar al-Islam, Ansar al-Sunnah, in they are pound for pound the most effective force in that region. They were able to put missiles and rockets right down the pipe in Tel Aviv. They were able to hold strategic trade routes and waterways at bay and hold that. They are not to be discarded or written off as just a terrorist organization. They are very capable, and they are very organized, and they are also willing. They are willing. That's another crucial piece to it, is that they are willing to put skin in the game, and they have, and they will. So how do you get Palestinians to leave? So this is the part of the Project Sunrise, or the great plan that Boston Consulting Group was involved in the beginning. And as I explain this, it will seem almost dystopian, but it is true that Palestinians will be forced, as we saw when the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was operating in southern Gaza, in Rafah. The intent of putting food distribution to the far south was to forcefully displace the entire population south. What we're seeing now is, with the implementation of this yellow line and the United States taking the lead through this Civil Military Coordination Center, or this CMCC, that is in Israel, manned by members of U.S. Central Command and Israeli IDF and Kogat. The plan now is, along the yellow line, to establish new distribution sites. The same company that I had worked for, the armed security apparatus of the Infidels Motorcycle Club, they are right now in Israel, having recruited up to 1,000 new armed contractors from the Infidels Motorcycle Club to soon establish 15 sites along the yellow line. As Palestinians are displaced, they get a choice. You stay here in this encampment where there's no water, there's no electricity, there's no aid, there's no vaccinations, there's no medical capability, and you slowly die. Or you get offered through the low cost of biometric enrollment, through a biometric enrollment device, and we will then issue your family a digital token that promises you that if you leave, that once we're done building our Riviera, you can come back. That's the plan. We all know that that is absurd, that that is laughable, that not only is it unfeasible nor non-feasible, it's preposterous. And the Palestinians aren't going to fall for it. So I think what we see in the future is a very willful and determined Palestinian people to stay in Gaza and not take the ruse, and a potential regional intifada rising up. Call it the fifth intifada, but it will be much greater, it'll be much bigger. In the United States, we're going to be in the mud, and we are not going to be stand away from it and say, oh, we can stay out of this. We will be dragged into it. And while we're also trying to figure out what's happening in Venezuela, and perhaps it's a great time for China to take some type of action in Taiwan, we have spread the peanut butter too thin across the stale cracker, and the United States is going to be responsible for it. And the worst part is that the leaders that we have in this country, in the United States, between the cabinet and the majority, not all, but the majority of our lawmakers, they don't see past their nose. They don't see past next week. They don't understand the existential threat on the horizon of the conditions that are being set right now. What's happening isn't going to come back to bite us tomorrow. But when it does, it is going to be in a way that the United States has not felt pain in a long time.
You're a marvelous interview guest, I must say, Lieutenant Colonel. You were a very fine soldier, and you're an even finer wordsmith. Your imagery and the picture that you painted of the world situation in that interview will, I think, live long and go far. I'm much obliged to you. Sir, you're an officer and a gentleman. I bid you good night. Thanks very much for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Let me take a quick break and I'll be right back. It's the Mother of All Talk Shows. Fabulous. Two great calls in a row there. One from California, one from Orlando. I think that Japan is walking on extremely thin ice in the provocations that they are currently allowing the US to manipulate them into making. I've spent a lot of time in China. I was there just a couple of weeks ago. There is visceral feelings about Japan in China. Of all of the countries of the world, China will never, ever, ever, ever forgive what Japan did to the Chinese people. They murdered more than 20 million Chinese. The war, which for us started in 1939 and for you started considerably more than that, further on than that. Japan invaded China in 1931 and didn't leave until their defeat in 1945. They further invaded other parts of China in 1936 and they killed 20 million Chinese people.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Has Donald Trump made the world safer, yes or no? The voting's closing a little bit, but still, Donald, you are well short of a majority. Has Donald Trump made the world safer, yes or no? Vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. Vote on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. And if you're one of those and such as those who support me on patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote there. Let's go to the first call, where Sarah is in London but wants to talk about Israel. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Hello, George Galloway. Thank you so much for taking my call. Yes, I'm from London, but I'm ethnically Somali. And I wanted to vocally speak out today on behalf of Somalis all around the world. The overwhelming majority of us unequivocally stand with Palestine. I have friends that have supported Somaliland recognition, whatever. I don't agree with them. They have the right to kind of, state their opinion. But you cannot say that you are pro-Palestinian and yet support Israel recognizing your country. This is a state that has been accused of suppressing Palestinian statehood and is accused of committing a genocide. And my second point is, isn't it interesting that, George, that Israel preaches all around the world not to unilaterally accept Palestine as an independent state? And this should be achieved only through negotiations and peace accords, but they have now done that. They've now done the opposite. So this technically should allow countries that were using negotiation as a reason not to recognize Palestine to now recognize Palestine.
Well, what a wonderful call, Sarah, and a breath of fresh air, hearing first off from an ethnically Somali young woman in London and expressing the views of Somalis across the world. I've been watching them, but in the so-called Somaliland itself, there are people videoing themselves waving Israeli flags. I even saw, la samahallah, a woman actually in an Israeli flag hijab and burqa. She was done up to the full nines in Israeli colors. And the airbase has already begun work. Israel is this very day hardening the shelters, building underground, turning the Berbera airbase into an Israeli airbase. Now, I personally, of course not calling for violence, I hate violence, but I personally believe they will not be allowed easily to achieve that. I personally believe that they will not be unmolested from the neighbors in trying to do that. After all, the neighbors would be committing suicide to allow Israel on Somali territory to build a hardened airbase from which they could deal death with impunity to all the people in the surrounding regions. So we'll see what happens on that. But on the hypocrisy point that you make, I'm afraid, Sarah, you'll discover that the world is full of that. Denmark, for example, is bitterly complaining at Donald Trump threatening to annex their territory. But the very first country in the world to recognize the illegal seizure of the so-called Kosovo from its motherland in Serbia was, yes, it was Denmark. They were the first country in the world to officially recognize the breakaway state. It didn't even break away of its own volition. It was broken away by NATO. But Denmark was first cab off the rank, offering recognition. And there are so many such examples. So don't be looking for a single standard or any kind of justice in the world. This show is called the Year of the Gun. In truth, every year is the year of the gun. You get what you can and you achieve and hold what you can depending on your own guns and the guns of your friends and allies. And amongst the people who will not accept this Israeli takeover of Somaliland are, of course, Russia and China. They know that this is a hostile act against their friends. their allies. China has many. Russia has others in Africa, and they will be the losers. They will be the people who will be turned over by this new development, and they will have something to say about it. Sarah, wonderful call. I'm grateful to you. Thanks for making it. Now I can also do comments. You can scan the QR code now on the corner of the screen, leave a comment, and if I can, I'll read it out. Like this one from Kurt Boss 678. Putin doesn't want a nuclear war. That is the only reason Putin is talking to Trump. Or Tramp, as Kurt puts it, though that may be merely a typo. Pauline Wooding says Zelensky is supposedly going to organize a referendum. How's that going to work with half the population out of the country? 9 million of the population out of the country, and millions more now living in Russia, in the east of the country. Parish Crooks says the EU mentioned dialogue works in their sanctions against Jacques Bode. Let's hope Nima is safe. Kinkle Z says, where did Canada get that $3 billion? From Putin's stolen assets? Actually, they borrowed it. They borrowed it to give it to Zelensky. FYIUC says, pitiful fools hate George Galloway because he has a conscience, is not a poodle for America, and will never sit with them in their pools of blood and excrement. Wow, thank you for that. Anthony Aguilar, formerly of this parish, 5 minutes ago, very kindly sends a donation of $9.99. Thank you, George, Team MOATS, and everyone watching. Look up, wise up, rise up in 2026. Peace on earth and free Palestine. What a beautiful thing to do. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. On line 2 is Sam in Montreal on Canada's Ukraine pledges. Well, Sam, you're considerably poorer today than you were yesterday. How are you feeling about it?
Oh, hi, George. Thanks for taking my call. I feel nothing about it because you didn't provide the context. Canada, since 2022, I actually have the number open in a tab here so I don't mistake it, committed $22 billion to Ukraine since 2022. So that's significantly more than 2.5.
That's the biggest in the world.
And
per
for
capita,
context, if
Sam,
we were the size of...
per capita, that's the biggest in the world.
Oh, yeah, by far. Not even close. I was about to say, if we were the size of the U.S., that would be the equivalent of committing $250 billion to Ukraine. And for context, again, setting aside the $22 billion since 2022, Canada's committed, you mentioned at the expense of affordable housing, Canada's committed under Trudeau $7.8, about $8 billion since 2022 to address affordable housing. So about 1/3 of what it committed to Ukraine. And it gets worse because obviously that money is not doing anything, because living in Montreal, I also pulled up the recent study from Statistics Canada about rents in Montreal, which have doubled between 2019 and 2024 from $1,130 to $1,930, about $2,000 a month. So from about $1,000 to about $2,000 in 5 years. And for context for that, the median household income in this city is $56,000 for employment income before tax. So effectively, people in this city, according to the couple of numbers I just gave you, are spending more than half of their income just on rent, if they have a place. And the last point I'll make is that it's worth pointing out, as you probably already know, Montreal is the home of the largest offices outside of the U.S. of B'nai B'rith, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I did know that because they once dogged my steps in the great city of Montreal. Sam, that was a corker of a call. I'm grateful to you for making it. Let me take a quick break because coming up is the maestro, Max Blumenthal himself. Stay tuned. My grandson, Sean, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific, and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age, and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
He's only the finest journalist in the English-speaking world and at the head of the finest news outfit, the wonderful and irreplaceable Grey Zone News. And he's very generous with us, with his time, as he is again tonight. The great Max Blumenthal. Welcome back, Max. Well, it's quite the night down in Florida. There's been a lot of murky things happen down there. How do you rate the current movie that we're watching with Trump and Zelensky there now?
You know, I've been paying attention to the U.S. troop formations in Florida that are directed against Venezuela more than I've been paying attention to the negotiations in Miami. I mean, I think the Russian delegation's playing it right. They're appealing to Trump's transactional side. But I just have come to expect nothing from any of these negotiations, and I've just kind of concluded that this war will be decided on the battlefield, as so many past conflicts, most recently Syria was. And Marco Rubio is one reason for that. He keeps changing the framework so that it's impossible for Russia to agree, especially at a point where Russia's winning. And Marco Rubio has been responsible for the worst foreign policy blunders of the Trump administration, and yet he has the highest approval rating of any Trump official, according to a recent Gallup poll. He's at 41% because the media protects him. Remember, Secretary of State Rubio was confirmed 99-0 by the U.S. Senate, including by Bernie Sanders, and it's Rubio who is behind this entire Venezuela debacle, which could soon turn into a hemispheric catastrophe, humanitarian catastrophe, military catastrophe, insurgency, civil war, more mass migration. Rubio has set the stage for all of it, and Trump is too mentally enfeebled to really right the ship, whether it's on Ukraine or with Venezuela, to literally turn back the ships like the USS Gerald Ford.
Well, let's start with Venezuela because you'll be familiar as a young father of two beautiful kids with the nursery rhyme, The Grand Old Duke of York, who had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill, only to march them down again. Isn't that the most likely outcome of what Trump has done? He cannot possibly imagine he can invade and subdue the mighty revolutionary forces of Venezuela across an area 3 times the size of Vietnam. And as Garland Nixon said, composed of jungles and mountains with jungles. Ideal territory for a guerra prolongada and one that the Americans would not win.
No, they have no idea what they're doing in the Trump administration with Venezuela. And you can see that they're constantly discarding tactics for new ones that reveal their ultimate agenda: straightforward, imperial resource theft. But to get there, they need to depose the government, and they need to find a sympathetic leader who will either negotiate on their terms or simply open up the entire country. That would be the plan of Maria Corina Machado, who has just won the Nobel War Prize in Oslo. She's the radical Venezuelan opposition leader backed by the US government for decades as she plotted coups. And now she's on the outside in exile. And she considers herself the heir to the throne of the Bolivarian Revolution and has put forward a plan to hand over $1.7 trillion in Venezuelan assets, oil, minerals, shoreline, infrastructure, to Trump's cronies. That might be very enticing to Trump, but I don't actually think the Trump administration takes her seriously. I think they have to understand that Maria Corina Machado wasn't even the biggest figure in the US-backed Venezuelan opposition, that she didn't even hold the most seats in the National Assembly through her party. She was the radical fringe, actually, of the opposition, and that they probably are seeking some kind of deal within the fold of Chavistas. But the problem is they can't get past the Venezuelan military, which has stood rock solid with Nicolas Maduro and with the Bolivarian constitution, which holds that Venezuela's resources are its own and will be used to fund social programs instead of simply given away to the highest foreign bidder. And that means that they can't install some figure in place of Nicolas Maduro who doesn't have the trust of the military, which means there's nothing they can do here other than some kind of invasion, which is also off limits, which is why they've resorted to stealing oil tankers. And I don't think that's a viable strategy for strangling the Venezuelan economy, because the economy has diversified so much over the past 4 or 5 years or longer, and Venezuela's drawing a lot of revenue through the export of its minerals, iron, ore, gold, these kinds of things. So oil isn't the only source of economic revenue for Venezuela. So the Trump administration's running out of tools. They have announced a 2-month quarantine around Venezuela in which no oil will supposedly get out, which costs the U.S. taxpayers a lot of money. And eventually the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier is going to have to be rotated out. So I actually think Nicolas Maduro has shown steadfastness and calm and projected confidence. He hasn't fallen into the trap of getting into a war of words with Trump or portraying himself as a kind of Che Guevara-style guerrilla leader. And he is firmly entrenched in Miraflores. And I don't think the Trump administration knows exactly what to do after this oil tanker theft. They've already failed on the drug boats, and it's created a political fiasco inside Washington. And what's fascinating for me to watch, George, is how the Democrats have solidly lined up against this war after years and years of them supporting all of these regime change plots and giving Juan Guaido a standing ovation in Congress. Now the Democrats, I would assume for opportunistic partisan reasons, are putting up real resistance to this, and the American public is completely against it as well. Over 70% oppose this.
Yeah. Whatever became of Juan Guaido is a question leaping into everyone's mind now. If you know, do tell us. But the seizing of oil tankers will have to end at the point that an oil tanker escorted by the Russian or Chinese Navy, or perhaps both, are escorting the tanker. This too is a wasting asset, this seizure, piracy on the high seas, isn't it?
It is. And we've seen the Bella 1, which was an unsanctioned tanker delivering oil to China, presumably purchased by Chinese buyers, attempt to be boarded by the Coast Guard, but the Bella kept moving, sending out emergency signals, and the Coast Guard was unable to take the tanker, as far as I know. So at that point, they'd have to, go full Houthi and actually strike the oil tanker to stop it from moving, and the United States isn't ready to go there. But look, they're going after unsanctioned tankers. It's just straight up piracy, and this is aimed at China. And we're waiting for. I'm waiting for a Chinese response, at least on the world stage, at least maybe at the UN Security Council, as well as a Russian response. And by the way, I have the answer on Juan Guaido.
Now, speaking,
he's
okay.
He's actually
we'll all be looking him up. The last I heard, he was a student at a polytechnic in Florida. I hope he wasn't able to take all that stolen gold from the Bank of England. But speaking of pirates, they used to say the Somalis were the pirates, but of course they were only unshaven pirates. The shaved pirates in pressed uniforms were us. But the Somali imbroglio just got even deeper, didn't it? With the recognition of so-called Somaliland by Netanyahu, the only suitor in the world ready to openly cavort with the breakaway statelet. And this evening, Israel is at work in the Berbera airfield, air base, hardening the shelters, lengthening the runway. Surely that's not going to be able to stand, is it?
Well, it reveals what a joke this entire project is. I mean, when so many more nations recognize a Palestinian state than Somaliland, and Israel comes in, it will discredit the cause of Somaliland as an independent nation, because Israel's the ultimate pariah state, and it sets Somaliland into on the course of conflict with other regional partners of Turkey and other powerful states that are not aligned with Israel. This is understood most directly as an attempt for Israel to find a kind of third party where it can ethnically cleanse Palestinian refugees from Gaza and essentially dump them, the way that the UK attempted to do with migrants to Rwanda, for example, or the way that the Trump administration dumped Venezuelan migrants in the CICOT torture center in El Salvador. But there's enormous amounts of resistance building in Somaliland. This is what I think a lot of people don't understand, a lot of outside observers don't understand, is that the Somali public across the board opposes Israel and is sympathetic to Palestinians. And there are now protests in the streets of Burao, a city in Somaliland, like growing protests with people chanting, I'm reading right now a translation of this chant, "We are Mujahideen, we support Palestine, we don't want Israel." A major Muslim cleric has been arrested in Somaliland for declaring opposition to this plan. And he said, "I am proud to be arrested for standing against Netanyahu." And the other reason they're doing this is because Israel is seeking a new area, and the US, I would assume too, under Trump, a new base from which to attack Ansar Allah in Yemen and other designated enemies, because there is a US base in Djibouti, but Djibouti has a formal treaty which holds that the United States cannot launch direct attacks on any other country from that base. So they need another kind of more vassalized territory to attack places like Yemen and, maintain influence around the Red Sea.
Yeah, but it would require the compliance of so many powerful actors, not the least of which, as you rightly say, are the Somalian people themselves, and even the people in so-called Somaliland themselves. As I understand it, this is a one-clan gig. All the other clans and all the other parts of Somaliland are wholly opposed to it, but there are many others and some of them, as Lieutenant Colonel Tony Aguilar just told us, pound for pound, just across the bay, you've got the Ansar Allah, the middleweight champions of the world. They are capable of landing rockets in Tel Aviv anytime they like. So are they really going to stand by and allow a vassal state of Israel and America to set up shop just across from them? Then there's Iran. Then there's the Sahel bloc, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Then there's Russia. Then there's China. And then, of course, there is Iran. Why would any or all of these people stay quiet while this operation was staged?
Well, they're not going to stay quiet. And that's why this is so unpopular in Somaliland, and why I think there could be even a risk of an armed insurgency if Israel sets up shop there, and why this might ultimately fail, and the peril of Israel attempting to become a regional hegemon and dominate not just the traditional areas of Greater Israel, but and it's near abroad, but the entire region, either operating through vassal state, kind of like imperial cutouts like Somaliland, or through their allies in the Epstein Accords, what are more officially known as the Abraham Accords, like the United Arab Emirates, which is kind of a vehicle for Israel power projection. And Israel is going to overextend itself in the next few years, and we're going to see a lot of rejection of the Israeli presence, because it just invites conflict whenever you allow the Israelis into your realm. It invites conflict, including with NATO members like Turkey. So I think this is doomed to fail.
Now, you mentioned a perfect segue, really, to the Epstein affair, which I know that you have followed, and I have too. It's reached a kind of surreal pitch now, isn't it, that the hoax that Trump described it as is having to be redacted like a giant zebra crossing on every page. But everyone somehow knows what's there under the black lines, and what's there is that the person most exposed next to Bill Clinton, but I would argue even more exposed than Bill Clinton, is Donald Trump himself. He must have known that this sewage would eventually come down the pipe when he ran for office. It's all a bit perplexing to me.
Well, he was sending mixed messages. I mean, he deployed all of his proxies. Dan Bongino stepping down as deputy director of the FBI because he's so embarrassed by this whole debacle. Kash Patel, the FBI director. Pam Bondi, all of the kind of paid pro-Trump influencers like libs of TikTok and all of these characters you see on Twitter X who got the fake Epstein Files Phase 2, which contained nothing new, to create the sense that this would only implicate the Democrats and the deep state. And they strung along low IQ voters in the MAGA base who believed that, something would actually take place which would challenge power and would unravel this pedophile conspiracy. And then it turns out that as we all knew, any of us who knew about Donald Trump's well-documented history, that it didn't necessarily expose Trump for sure, but it certainly implicated Donald Trump as a very close Epstein associate. And Donald Trump has said himself that he believes that these files are phony and that they threaten to hurt, in his words, some very good people, including himself, who he sees as the best person. And so we have this massive tranche of redactions, which could easily be unredacted by anyone watching this right now by simply copying and pasting the DOJ files into a Word document or into an email. And I don't know if this had anything to do with Elon Musk's Doge cutting contracts for Adobe at the Department of Justice, but they actually did do that. They cut millions of dollars of contracts for software that is used for redactions. And now the public can see what's in them. And you have this kind of smorgasbord of allegations, which are random allegations that may actually not be true about, sexual assault and pedophilia. You had a fake document, which was a letter from Epstein to Larry Nassar, the gymnastics coach who's in prison for life for sexually abusing young female gymnasts. And yet the Department of Justice couldn't even keep control of or vet those documents in advance. And now it's all just circulating in the kind of partisan ecosystem online. And a lot of people believe them. And then there are real things that I think are of significance, like we've learned that Jeffrey Epstein had more foreign passports under assumed names than we previously knew, which further suggests that he was some kind of intelligence asset. But none of this, the redactions themselves and the way that they could be easily unredacted, it perfectly encapsulates the shattering of Donald Trump's mystique as a president who was going to take on the deep state. And he's lost his luster among his own base. And this will have serious implications for the upcoming congressional midterms.
Yeah, exactly the point I was about to turn to. Not only has Trump blown any possibility of establishing a political dynasty, his sons, his daughters, maybe even his son-in-law. I'm sure he had an idea of Trumpism after Trump. After all, we've got Blairism after Blair. Why should you get off lightly? But the possibility of the Republicans actually losing power, and then the Democrats, now reinvigorated, as you said, by the Venezuela affair, actually going for nap, going for proper impeachment and removal from office. It's all turned very sour for Donald Trump, and that's beginning to be obvious with the viciousness at the base. When you've got, for example, Alex Jones launching unhinged attacks on his comrade, Candace Owens, you realize that it's all rattling down on the right.
Oh, yeah. The last TPUSA AmFest was a disaster. Everybody was at each other's throats. Ben Shapiro was he was holding the banner for the pro-Trump faction, which is now the Republican establishment, which essentially is the deep state. And he didn't mention Israel once in his speech, which I thought for his own objectives was an effective speech because Ben Shapiro didn't put forward any agenda of his own. He simply critiqued Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, and those who are the critics of Trump who will no longer speak to them, won't give them the time of day. Marjorie Taylor Greene was also a target of his attack, and who also have been critics of Israel and Trump's embrace of Netanyahu. And the tenor of Ben Shapiro's speech was extremely nasty, extremely angry. You could tell he was speaking on behalf of the Zionist donor class that has Trump by the short and curlies, and that they are getting desperate. And you can feel the same anger from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has just quit Congress because she was with Trump from the beginning, from the first time she erupted onto the national stage in an ad where she's holding an AR-15 assault rifle running for Congress as the ultra MAGA congresswoman from Georgia. Now she's persona non grata in the White House. Tucker, I don't know if he'd be welcomed back into the White House at this point. Candace Owens, who is close friends with Charlie Kirk, is now hated by the TPUSA leadership and the Trump administration. And so this is symbolic of them sort of losing their base, the sense among so many of the early ultra MAGA influencers that they've been stabbed in the back and betrayed, and that Donald Trump is going to ultimately release a memoir entitled Mein Schwamp, because he has embraced the swamp.
Yeah, they definitely are. Now, you weren't interested really in Zelensky's visit to Florida, but tomorrow Netanyahu appears. I don't know how many times he's been to Washington in just 13 months of Trump presidency. What's he after this time, and how can they turn back the tide, which is the most welcome tide I've ever seen, which is the United States of America itself turning against Israel? What have they got up their sleeve? Have they got anything left in their locker?
Well, they've got a lot left in their locker, because we keep sending them these 2,000-pound bombs and F-35s. But Netanyahu this may be Netanyahu's most decisive visit or most pivotal visit to Washington, and it's certainly his most desperate. As long as the war in Gaza raged, and there was a war in Lebanon as well, or Netanyahu could drive momentum towards a war with Iran, he felt like he had Trump under his control. But in the last several months, and since the Gaza ceasefire, which we all know isn't really a ceasefire and isn't really being enforced by Trump, but is still kind of deprived Netanyahu of some momentum, he has been frightened by what Trump is doing, particularly since Trump met with MBS. Trump's sons have set up something called World Liberty Financial, which is a crypto forum for legalized bribery. And the Saudis are pumping money from their sovereign investment fund into the Trump family. And one of the things that they have been edging Trump or influencing Trump to do is to embrace the Al-Qaeda rebranded government in Syria of Ahmed al-Sharaa, because Saudi Arabia has a lot of business interest in Syria. It wants to get involved. It's competing with Turkey for a cut of the post-Assad carcass of Syria. And Trump has embraced al-Sharaa in the White House, something that really upset Netanyahu. And the Trump administration has asked Israel to reduce the pace of its attacks on Syrian territory. So I think that's going to be part of Netanyahu's agenda. He's going to try to pry Trump away from the Saudis by demanding that he not give Saudi Arabia any F-35s. In fact, Netanyahu has announced that no country in the region should have F-35s. Turkey has signed up for the F-35 program. Netanyahu has announced plans for a $100 billion domestic military program to create new military platforms and make Israel independent from countries like the United States. This is something the U.S. would not tolerate from any of the Arab monarchies, which have $1 trillion to play with. So why would they tolerate it from Israel? Well, that's something, it's almost like a threat aimed at the U.S. And Netanyahu wants to address concerns within the White House that he is harming them politically. Axios, which is like this access journalism site that dumps information and leaks on behalf of powerful elites in the Beltway, just reported that everyone in the White House is sick of Netanyahu except for Trump, who still seems to like him. Rubio's even sick of him. Witkoff can't stand him. J.D. Vance can't stand him. I mean, we all know that. J.D. Vance was publicly humiliated on his last visit to Israel. So Netanyahu is trying to hold off trying to just at least maintain Donald Trump on his side. And I don't know if you paid any attention to the recent White House Hanukkah party, but that was a truly bizarre scene where Mark Levin, who is this Israel First radio host and Fox host who's the voice of Netanyahu in the United States, actually wrapped his arm around Donald Trump and embraced him in a very aggressive, almost paternalistic way, and declared that Donald Trump is the first Jewish president. And I felt like there was a veiled threat there and that Donald Trump was uncomfortable. So Netanyahu is there coming to increase the pressure. I'd pay very close attention to this visit because I think it'll be pivotal for the special relationship.
Well, I'm hoping Max Blumenthal is the first Jewish president of the United States. Myself, Max, thanks. You never disappoint. How wonderful to see you again. All the best to the family. Thanks for joining us. Let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls right up until Gayatri. I'm not actually sure at this moment where I'm going to put Gayatri, but we'll see if we can achieve it. Stay tuned.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They are nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting, the victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You're watching the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live at 5 o'clock in the morning as it happens here in Bali. Has Donald Trump made the world safer? You've got 10 minutes still to vote on that poll, yes or no, on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or if you're watching on the YouTube stream, make sure that you have subscribed to my channel, or if you're one of those and such as those, the very vanguard that have kept us going, our supporters on patreon.com/George Galloway. Let's go to the great city of Liverpool, where Jim wants to talk about Eisenhower and JFK. I told you we are the global university of the airwaves. Welcome, Jim.
Hello, George. Nice to speak to you again. It is some years since we last spoke. I'm in the beautiful city of Liverpool. I was about to say good evening, but it's actually good morning in your case. So,
good
sadly,
morning for me, yes.
Yeah, for the circumstances and stuff. I was just, obviously, an avid listener, and, I've probably plucked up the courage to get on the show, and maybe I would just ask people to, there's a thing out on one of the platforms there, I think I'm okay to name YouTube, where Eisenhower in his farewell address warns the world, what's coming about the hands of the military getting into government and influence and giving them the power, and how this wheel will turn constantly. And it's been going since it's been going from the late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and it's like all these point people have been placed in around the globe for it, and they're all driven, for me, Trump is just driven totally by money and power. And, we can all say what we think he is or what he's not. $1 billion wouldn't be enough for him. He would be going for $2 billion, $3 billion. And these are like this all over the world, sadly. And I know Zelensky, we had to just touch on Ukraine. You know what happened there? There was a coup d'etat.
Yeah, I mean, you're breaking up a bit, but I got the very important point that you are making. As Bob Dylan might have put it, do you think all your money can buy back your soul on that pale afternoon? when the casket is laid into the ground, and Bob promised to stand above it until he was sure that they were dead. These people who have sold everything for money will surely not be able to buy back their soul. But in the interim, they have been responsible for all of the crimes that have happened since Eisenhower made those remarks, to which you rightly draw attention. The presence of what he called the military-industrial complex. I think it was the first time a person of his stature had used that term. That military-industrial complex, which has expanded to a military-industrial media complex and intelligence complex, these people rule the Western world, and it's not even as if they're making a good job of it. They killed JFK, I have no doubt about it, and they killed anything that was good about America that day. And it's been all downhill ever since, and the presidents have become ever more feeble and small compared to Eisenhower and Jack Kennedy. So the world has changed. I mean, I'm right now in the east. The sun will be rising in a couple of minutes, and it will rise far, far higher and earlier than it will where you are in the great city of Liverpool, I'm sorry to say. Our part of the world, which ruled the world for 500 years, is done. It's finished. Anybody who could leave to sunnier climes where the sun is rising, where it's not pouring with rain and bitterly cold and governed by the worst government, the most unpopular, hated government that Britain has ever known. Anybody who could would be out of there. And of course, involuntarily, I'm now one of those. Jim in Liverpool, thanks for that call. I've got to talk about the Christmas donors. The Christmas donors were phenomenal for the show. I really appreciate it. Go to the website, by the way, MOATS.tv, if you haven't yet. But a big thank you if you are one of those, and there were many who visited the website over the festive period, just like James Marco Marzella, Michael Murray, David Waltham, Donna Ross, who's now a MOATS legend, such as her regular generosity been. That's Donna from Panama. And Elaine Ryan. Please, tonight, do become a MOATS donor, and in the new year we'll be announcing some unique prizes for our MOATS big donor, so stay tuned for that. It's Uncle Hoz in London. A Merry Christmas to you, Hoz. Very glad to see you appear on my screen. What do you want to talk about tonight?
George, the one thing I wanted to talk to you about, if I may, and it's nothing to do with anything you've spoken about tonight, but it's something that bothers me. Is I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but the UK Armed Forces are offering opportunities to young people to take a gap year, and in that gap year they basically go into an army officer internship. What are your thoughts on that? And I want you to bear in mind as well that the number of people that have decided they don't want to remain in the British Army or in the British Armed Forces, and the Armed Forces numbers are coming down. And it's mostly because they feel disillusioned by the operations that they're doing, the operations in Iraq, Afghanistan. It's taken their toll on people, I think. And there is a recruitment crisis. So this is their way of... What do you think? Do you think this is going to work? And also, further to this is, bear in mind, this is for the army officers and this is the higher level people. Do you think this is a way of the British government trying to bolster us one way or another to start making, national service something that's going to get done?
Well, look, I think I did actually mention it in my monologue. I said, beware of the geeks bearing gifts, and the biggest geek in the British government, the great war leader, Johnheeley, is offering the gift to school students who are about to go to university to take a gap year in the British military. And for all the reasons you adumbrated there, and some I'll add myself, the take-up of that will be humiliatingly small. I have a son of 18. He's not going to take a gap year in the British military. He'd be more likely to take a gap year fighting for the Viet Cong. He is a political opponent of the Starmer regime and the role of the British in the slaughter of his people. He is, of course, an Arab. Why would he join up for the British Army, which has never done either slaughtering Arabs and Muslims or collaborating in the slaughter of Arabs and Muslims, as they did throughout the genocide in Palestine? So there's many people like him. There are others who wouldn't fancy military life if you paid them rather more than they intend to pay them. This is woke generation. This is TikTok generation. It's Gen Z generation. And the idea of taking orders from Keir Starmer to go and kill somebody, although you may very well be killed yourself, is just an absurdity. You mentioned the conflicts in which our government, Labour government, by the way, used and abused the trust of our people, including our soldiers, sailors and airmen, and they haven't gone away, you know. Nobody's forgotten about the lies that marched us in to the disasters in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Nobody's forgotten the role that we played in destroying Libya and replacing a nationalist government with an Islamist fanatic hodgepodge of 3, 4, 5 governments. Nobody's forgotten that we did the same in Syria. Everybody hates, every conscious person hates the role that our country is playing in the world. And if they didn't, there would be something wrong with them. And everybody looks around and they look at the state that we're in, the state our economy is in, the state our big cities are in, the state of our society, our culture. They look at the drugs, they look at the crime, they look at the changes in Britain that they thoroughly disapprove of, and they say, why would I fight for that? This whole scheme of turning Britain into an imperial power again is completely doomed. It's truly doomed. And when it's led by people like Johnhealey, I mean, who would be stirred, shaken or stirred by a clarion call from Johnhealey? Look at him, listen to him. Who would be stirred with patriotic fervour by the speak your weight machine that is Keir Starmer? Keir Starmer is like a voice in a lift telling you that you're now on the 8th floor. Who is inspired by these people? Who is impressed by these people? You seen the price of gold tonight? Do you know the price that Gordon Brown sold it all at? Do you know that we would be tonight 42 billion pounds sterling richer if we'd waited till now to sell the gold rather than when Gordon Brown did it? They've seen the disasters in Iraq and Afghanistan. They've seen what Blair did. They've seen what Brown did. They've seen what Cameron did. They've seen what God knows how many prime ministers since Cameron have done. Who's inspired by that? Who wants to fight for that? And who wants, perchance, to die for that? And as I keep saying, to die, to decide what side of a line Kupiansk will lie on at the end of this conflict, well, that matter is already decided. Kupiansk is in Russia. Thanks, Hoz. Now, on the podcast, for Christmas. You've been downloading all around the world. It was the best week for our podcast. We're in the top 20 for politics in Croatia, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Norway, and India this week. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on the corner of your screen now. Let's take a couple of calls. Aaron is in Canada, in Winnipeg, on the Canadian Prime Minister, Mr. Markcarney, formerly of the City of London. Didn't do much of a job there either, Aaron. How's he doing for you?
Well, first of all, I just want to say you're my favorite member of Parliament in the entire Commonwealth. I have a political history. I was a former organizer, and it's not going well. I live in the city of Winnipeg. It's in the middle of Canada. It's very cold, and there's a lot of homeless people. Back when I did work in the government, I've retired. I got a part-time job just selling marijuana to people now, legally. Because I just didn't want to deal with the government anymore. Because when I woke up yesterday and I went onto the CBC website and saw that we had given $2.5 billion more to Ukraine, I was like, we could have solved homelessness in Canada. We could have solved homelessness in Canada with all the money that we've given, and it's money laundering. That's all it is. It's money laundering. It's money laundering for drug dealers. It's money laundering for weapons manufacturers. The Congress in the United States can't even pass a bill. I think it was Rand Paul that said we just want accountability on where all this money's going, and it couldn't even pass. Like it's a racket, and I'm very glad that you brought up the impoverished people of Canada, because there's been a change in the 2020s. In this country, and especially in this city, which is one of the most crime-ridden, impoverished cities in Canada, of 800,000 people. It's a major city in Canada. Like, it's just a collective feeling of despair and fear. And
well, I'm brokenhearted to hear that, Aaron, but I do recognize it. It's been some time, more than a decade, nearly 15 years since I toured Canada last time. I'm very, very sorry, because I love the Canadian people and the country itself very much indeed. You've been singularly badly served by your leaders, one after the other, both cheeks of the same arse, conservative and so-called liberal. But your people have to wake up. You have to take responsibility. Your people have to wake up to the fact that in this increasing sea of misery that is Canada, you or your governments, using your money, have become per capita the biggest donors to Zelensky in the whole world. When you have so many uses, not least behind the railway station in Vancouver, that you could have put that money to. Aaron, thanks for the call. Some comments. Jamila Asfu sends £10. Thank you, Jamila. Hi, Mr. Galloway, we love you. I'm very scared of Israel coming to Africa to terrorize us. What can we do if Netanyahu is coming for Africa? Well, the Africans will need to stand up and stand together and stand tall. And they have many friends around the world that will come to their side if they do so. Dejuma Boutique says the only Nigerians celebrating the bombing are Western NGO, Gates, MacArthur, NED, Rockefeller, etc. funded recipients. Jack Klugman, great name, says IDF has been training and arming militia, i.e. terrorists in the Democratic Republic of the Congo for years. 30% of Israel's exports are blood diamonds stolen via these militias. Amen to that, Jack. And Daniel Munster says they want Somalia's land to control the shipping lanes and make a new passageway through Palestine. And Mofofomo says, Brother George, when are you going to visit us in Kuala Lumpur? Very, very, very soon, my dear brother. Watch out. Well, there's a legend on the line. I think it'll be the last call of the night. I've no idea how long the show has gone on for because of the difficulties at the beginning. But stand by for the legend that is Tommy in Glasgow. Go on yourself, Tom.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brother George.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah barakatuh.
To the very, very brief, positive, just a message. Thank you for your show, all the callers throughout the year. Yes, everyone who's participated, family, peace and blessings to you and to everyone. And Palestine, God bless you, brother, and keep it up. And for 2026, Umrik, and may you take over and keep it going, brother. God bless and thanks, and God bless.
God bless to you, Tommy. Thank you very much, and hail, hail to the famous Glasgow Celtic. The biggest donors tonight, let me announce, you can, of course, do so. You can even beat them on MOATS.tv. But a drum roll for tonight's big donors: Douglas McFarland, Kenneth Morris, Peter McAvoy, Loris Noruzi, and Ellie Newt. A big, big thanks to each and every one of you and everyone else who has given this evening and will do later. Another legend. You wait so long for a legend to come along, and then three come along at once. We've had Tommy. Here's Norma in Bristol, the original legend. She wants to talk about Brigitte Bardot. I'm glad somebody else does. Norma, I was beginning to think nobody knew who I was talking about.
No, George. Actually, I'm only going to make it's a bit of a light-hearted call. Just 2 points. No, I saw the film ages ago when she was very young. I think it was called And Woman Was Created. And I've never forgotten it.
God Created Woman with Roger
God
Vadim.
Created Woman, that was it, yeah. I thought it was absolutely marvellous. It was kept my, eyes wide open. But the other thing is, I know you're in Bali at the moment. Now, in 1997, when I was on holiday with my husband, on the holiday of a lifetime, and we were in Hong Kong, but unfortunately, he had a stroke, so we didn't go to Bali, which we were going to, where you were. Oh. But after that, we were supposed to visit Lombok. Now, did you know that the largest Komodo dragon lives there? So I thought to myself, you be careful, George. If you want to go there, keep your eyes open,
Well, I truly will. What a heartwarming story. Thank you very much indeed. May God rest your late husband. And I'm in Bali for you in memory of him. And when the sun rises, as it may already have done, I can't see behind me, I can see Lombok from my window. And I don't know if we'll make it there. We've got many other places to go, but if we could, I'd dearly like to. Norma, Brigitte Bardot was a truly wonderful actress in her early days. At least she was a truly beautiful woman. She was the epitome of French style and chic, and so to her family, but also to the wider French public, we express our condolences this evening, as she has passed away at the tremendous age of 91. And the third and final legend is Erebos in New York on Nicki Minaj. I keep hearing about her, Erebos. I still have absolutely no idea who she is, but she's popping up in the most unlikely of places and saying the most unlikely of things. What's your take on her?
Salutations and greetings to MOATS, the final MOATS of this year. Thankfully for your family, Clan Galloway, the great 4G network, Mr. George Galloway, Mrs. Gayatri Galloway, and the MOATS audience. Fantastic guests. Very, very articulate. Nikki Minaj, she comes from the upper class Christian family. You'd never tell that she's Christian if you hear her rap lyrics. She's from Trinidad and Tobago, the same Trinidad and Tobago that has been used and is being used as a port for all these warships. You know, her popularity comes from her rap. You know, she's viewed by some as the most, I guess, prolific or popular or skilled, if you're into the rap genre, female rapper of all time. So she has tremendous influence. However, her dangerousness is only in proximity to the idiocy of the people that are riled up by her, just like any mob mentality, you know, knuckle dragging. You know, it don't take a lot, you know, and you just throw enough money at her, like most rappers, and they'll say whatever you want them to say because they're narcissistic and vain, just like most people that seek fame on that level. You know, but I do want to say, you know, I've wasted enough time on Nicki Minaj. I do want to pay a debt to MOATS before this year ends. And, you know, please let me know if you can hear me. I'm going to do a sound test by the Mississippi. Did you hear that?
Yeah, very good.
Okay, so here we go. This is a debt. You know, I want to pay it before I close out the year. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. In Salt Lake, Joe, says I to him standing by my bed. They framed you on a murder charge, says Joe, but I ain't dead. Says Joe, but I ain't dead. The copper bosses killed you, Joe. They shot you, Joe, says I. Take more than guns to kill a man, says Joe, I didn't die. Says Joe, I didn't die. And standing there as big as life and smiling with his eyes, says Joe, what they forgot to kill went on to organize, went on to organize. Joe Hill ain't dead, he says to me. Joe Hill ain't never died. Where working men are out on strike, Joe Hill is at their side. Joe Hill is at their side. From San Diego up to Maine, in every mine and hill, where working men defend their rights, is there you'll find Joe Hill. Is there you'll find Joe Hill. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. Thank you, MOATS.
Oh, just beautiful. Thank you, Erobos. What a perfect ending, at least the penultimate act of this evening's show. I knew that your wonderful Barry White, dark brown basso profundo would do justice to that priceless song. And indeed it has. Erobos started out with Nicki Minaj, ended up with the far more wholesome hero of the Americas, the great union leader, Joe Hill. Let me take a quick break, and then it's the one and only Gayatri. Here she comes. Stay tuned.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now David Kelly as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down. That was a guy that could have brought down the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published, but actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
Which camera am I speaking into?
Asking you about Bali.
Very, very proud of that movie, Killing Kelly, by the way, and you get it gratis on YouTube nowadays, and indeed the earlier film, The Killings of Tony Blair, Killing Kelly, Killings of Tony Blair, both now free to air on YouTube. Has Donald Trump made the world safer? Yes or no? 20,000 people voted, and sorry, Donald, but it's a big no. Gayatri, what's rattling?
Well, live from Bali, and I know that the word Bali comes up with islands, sea, sun, paradise. Really, it's what is it called again? What did it say upon arrival? The last paradise on earth.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the last, but it's definitely a paradise.
It is a paradise. But to me, Bali actually means one thing. I associate it with one thing, and that is Sukarno. Because his mother was from Bali, Sukarno is a big, big figure, not least because he's, of course, the founding father, but the fact that his mother was Balinese is a big thing here. So you see his face, his name everywhere. There's a big museum dedicated to him. There's many, many statues around. And of course, Bali was one of the sites where the 1965 mass killings took place during the anti-communist purge, which was, of course, coordinated and backed, supported by the CIA and the West, and which toppled our founding father Sukarno and replaced him by the General Suharto. This is not a secret. I mean, John Perkins, the author of The Economic Hitman, has written about this extensively, and CIA has admitted, so this is not a secret. The thing is that they are just not quitting. They don't know any stopping. I want to talk about this latest appointment by Donald Trump of his envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, who is the Israeli-American Rabbi Yehuda Kaplun. This took place last week, and he explicitly mentioned my country in this way: education, education, education. Education is the essence. Indonesia has 350 million Muslims living in their country. How will we change their educational books? How will we change their educational books?
What's the rabbi's name?
His name is Yehuda Kaplun.
Good luck with that, Rabbi Yehuda. Good luck.
Hands off Indonesia. It's not going to happen. But this is a very scary appointment by Donald Trump. So to the question whether Donald Trump is making the world a safer place, not by making the likes of him your special envoy in your U.S. department. And neither...
These people are creating anti-Semitism.
Of course.
Anti-Semitism is a real thing, but they are multiplying it. Because they claim that they're acting in Gaza on behalf of all Jews. So if you hate what they're doing in Gaza, unless you have read a lot of books, you're going to hate them.
You are, yeah. It's perhaps the plan. I mean, this is outrageous, these things, the way they spill it out for us. The other, well, not so much appointment, but association by Donald Trump, that doesn't really help, is of course Nicki Minaj, who Erobos touched upon. I introduced you to her when she took the stage by voicing her support for President Trump for standing up for the Christians, persecuted Christians in Nigeria. And now she has well and truly entered MAGA land by taking stage with the widow of Charlie Kirk, Erica Kirk, at the Tipping Point conference, this huge conference that took place.
Lots of fireworks, lots of glitter pants.
Yeah, exactly. And did you know that she was very beloved by the queer and LGBTQ community? So that was Nicki Minaj then, and I don't know what they think of her being part of MAGA in that sense. But so there she was on stage with Erica Kirk, the widow of Charlie Kirk, who was the founder of Tipping Point USA. And she continued, she made many outrageous statements from that platform, but the one that stood out for me was when she said, America, we will speak up for Christians wherever they are in the world. Yeah? We're going to speak up for all the Christians wherever they are in the world.
Except the Holy Land?
Except the Holy Land, or wherever it doesn't suit us.
Except Jesus' people themselves.
Yes, except forgetting the fact that Jesus would have been born in rubble if he was born today.
Wow.
So
I've already learned more than I need to know about Nicki Minaj.
Yeah.
She's a non-person for me.
Yeah.
I'm dropping her in the memory hole. You got anything else left before we tell people what we're doing on Wednesday?
Well, I think we should catch the sunrise. It is actually coming up now behind us.
The sun is coming up like thunder out of Lombok across the bay. It is amazing, but we'll be back, won't we?
Yep, we'll be back
on Wednesday with a New Year's Eve special show. So don't miss that. I know some of you missed the live on Christmas Eve, but you're catching up now. If you can't make the New Year's Eve show, do catch up with it, because we do have something important to say. It's been marvelous. Can I take you for breakfast?
Breakfast sounds as good as chips.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Go get 'em, George.